Gentlemen, again, we bid you a welcome and are grateful that you are here. We'll begin this session. I just wanted to let you know that as you look around the auditorium, there aren't a great number of people in the auditorium. There's a few of you, but there are lots joining us virtually. We have people coming in on the chat from South Carolina, from Canada, from South Africa, from Chile. So it's a very well-attended conference, about 4 to 1, as you have heard. Let me begin by introducing our speakers for this session. The first one is Richard E. Bennett. He is currently the site director and president of the Winter Quarters Mormon Trail Center in Omaha, Nebraska, a native of Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. He received his PhD at Wayne State University in American Intellectual History. He has published widely in early Latter-day Saint history, including Mormons at the Missouri, 1846 to 48, and Should We Die, University of Oklahoma Press. His most recent works include Temple's Rising, A Heritage of Sacrifice, and 1820, Dawning of the Restoration, Religious Studies Center, BYU. He recently retired from teaching at Brigham Young University after 24 years service in the Department of Church History and Doctrine. He and his wife, Pat, have 5 children and 29 grandchildren. Our second speaker will be Aaron Mayer. I hope I say that name right. Aaron Mayer is the superintendent of National Park Service National Trails office in Santa Fe, New Mexico. In addition to the Mormon Pioneer National Historic Trail, his office administers 8 other National Historic Trails, including the California, Oregon, and Pony Express. He received his training as a historian from the University of New Mexico and is a 28-year veteran of the National Park Service. Our third speaker, Dr. Daniel Olson, is a professor in and chair of the Department of Geography at Brigham Young University. He received his PhD in geography at the University of Waterloo in Canada. His research examines the intersections between religion, spirituality, pilgrimage, and tourism. More specifically, he focuses on the management of sacred sites, the pilgrimage-tourism dichotomy, dark tourism and pilgrimage, religious routes and trails, religious tourism, environment interactions, and sacred space. He also has a passion for the Mormon Trail and storytelling via mapping. Now, on the lighter side, both Dr. Bennett and Dr. Olson are Canadians. So if you hear a little bit of oot and de boot, you'll know why. Dr. Bennett.
Can you hear me? Can we see the slides? Here we go. If one of our purposes today is to celebrate the Mormon Exodus and the Mormon Trail across Iowa, then perhaps we should start by asking the following question. Why was there ever a Mormon Trail anyway? And why did they ever come here? If we're going to celebrate this remarkable event, it's probably a very good reason just to go back together and review together this morning a little bit of the poignant history behind that remarkable story of the Mormon Exodus across Iowa. We don't have time in this conference to speak about the Nebraska side of it. Today is Iowa. And so let's go back together to the countdown to Exodus and what it was that caused this to happen in the first place. Most of this will come as review. We will go back to the 27th of June, 1844. In Carthage, Illinois, at approximately 5 o'clock in the afternoon, when Joseph Smith, the founding prophet, president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, was murdered in cold blood, along with his brother Hiram, at the hands of a wicked mob, none of whom were ever brought to justice for this heinous act that ended in the death of the prophet Joseph Smith. The balls that pierced the heart and soul of Joseph Smith were really aimed at the existence, the very existence of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it was only a matter of time. It was only a matter of time before this exodus would have to occur. So what I want to do as we go through this is to count down to the Exodus from the 27th of June to 1844. Don't have time for everything. We'll just hit the highlights. Back in 1838 and 39, when the Latter-day Saints were living in Missouri, Governor Lilburn W. Boggs passed an extermination order against the Latter-day Saints. You sometimes ask yourself, well, why were the Latter-day Saints ever so persecuted and hounded out anyway? And there are so many reasons we can't begin to name them. But perhaps they would crystallize around three things, three perceptions, many times erroneous, nevertheless perceptions, that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormonism so-called, was anti-American. Joseph Smith running as president as well as being the president of the church. Anti-Christian with all kinds of new doctrines. Anti-family with rumors of plural marriage and all kinds of other things that were occurring in the 1840s. That extermination order led to the Latter-day Saints being driven out of Missouri, and they went east across the state of Missouri to Nauvoo, eventually, first to Quincy and then up to Nauvoo, Illinois. Things went well in Illinois. We had, or when I say we, the Latter-day Saints were given a Nauvoo Charter, 1841, to legalize the establishment of the great city of Nauvoo, which had, in 1844, some 12,000 people, arguably larger than Chicago. But in 1845, on the 24th of January, was the revocation by the Nauvoo legislature of the Nauvoo Charter. And that charter had legalized the city, had given the Saints a police force, a university, a municipal court, and a legion, a Nauvoo Legion, the permission to have a Nauvoo Legion, which was under the Acts of the United States, that each major city should have its own militia. But in 1845, not an extermination order, but a revocation of the Nauvoo Charter, which was a writing on the wall that there was very little time left for the Latter-day Saints in Illinois. In April 1845, then Governor Thomas Ford's counsel to the Saints was, it would be good policy for your people to move to some far distant country. Your religion is new, and it surprises the people, as any great novelty in religion generally does. I do not foresee the time when you will be, notice the word, permitted to enjoy quiet. Brigham Young, who at the time was then president of the Council of the 12 Apostles, does not become president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints officially until 1847. Brigham Young, as president, has to make some serious decisions, he and his colleagues among the 12 apostles. And I have this slide up here that in September of 1845, the decision was made to begin to leave, that the Latter-day Saints would begin to leave in the spring of 1846. A committee of 5 was appointed to study all matters touching the expedition. And as regards the time to start, we cannot fix on that yet. But they were clearly thinking in the early fall of 45 that it was inevitable. And I think we have to use that term deliberately. It was inevitable that there would be a Mormon trail, that there would be a Mormon exodus. There was no future for the Latter-day Saints in the United States of America. They then was in 1845. The saints could not go back east. They'd been driven out of Missouri. They'd been driven out of Ohio, all the way back to New York. The only hope was to move west outside of then the United States of America. I want to thank the Church Historical Department for the magnificent work it has done in publishing the Joseph Smith papers. You'll notice in the footnotes that I'm quoting from the Council of 50 Minutes, recently published by the Church Historical Department. I'm amazed at how the church has made available so much of our history to bring to light things that have not yet been so well known, and to encourage all, whether Latter-day Saints or otherwise, to study its history in all its depth, because it's a remarkable story, which we're celebrating today. If you can celebrate such a dreadful thing as driving out an entire people from this nation. In the fall of 1845, Nauvoo became one huge wagon-making factory with some 1,800 to 2,000 wagons that were being constructed by the church itself with church funds, tithing funds from the members, and other contributions. We sometimes we think that everyone brought their own wagons. Well, that's not the case. Most people couldn't afford wagons. They could barely afford meals on their table, let alone fitting out, as they call them, fit-outs, wagons of this size. And so we see Nauvoo turn into an industrial capacity in making wagons of all kinds to move west. I don't want to bore you with all the details of the Mormon wagon, so-called Mormon wagon, and its details and its colors and what have you. And it's a Mormon fit-out usually would consist of 2 or 3 pairs of oxen, or at this time, horses as well as oxen. And that the whole city was going to be divided into companies. They're not all going to come out at once. You understand that? You can't have 12,000 people leaving all at once. And the popular theory that everybody crossed the frozen Mississippi River and everybody got across is a fallacy. Yes, that did freeze from time to time, and a few did cross, but the Latter-day Saints are going to be coming in peristaltic wave fashion, leaving some in the early spring, some in the summer, some not until the fall. But the rising tensions, the mob action, the persecution that was aimed at the saints, now beginning to circle the wagons, if you will, circle Nauvoo. We're going to start burning down communities, the mobs are saying. We're going to start giving indications that you've got to leave even earlier. You've got to leave earlier because we want you driven out. And so many homes are being destroyed in regions around Nauvoo. Yellowrome simply means Morley, which was a Morley, Yellowrome spelled backwards, Morley being a settlement outside and near Nauvoo. Quincy, the city of Quincy, which was so long a great friend of the saints. It was the Quincyans who invited the saints to come in the first place and settle in Quincy, recognizing the fact that there's no future. There's no future for the Latter-day Saints. They themselves will adopt a resolution, even a committee organization. You've got to leave. You've got to leave. The sooner the better. From John J. Hardin, who is the general of the Illinois State Militia, not necessarily a mobocrat by any stretch, but in his capacity as the head of the state militia, writes to the saints here in October 1845, "We are convinced that affairs have reached such a crisis that it has become impossible for your church to remain in peace in this country. Should you not depart in the spring, we are satisfied, however much we may deprecate violence and bloodshed, that violent measures will be restored to complete your removal, which will result in most disastrous consequences to yourselves, that the end will be your expulsion from the state. We think and I think this is a critical statement, we think that steps should be taken by you to make it apparent that you are actually planning to remove in the spring. So just waiting for the spring was not enough. Show us that you really mean to leave. Show the mobs you're going to really go so that we won't have a civil war. Reynolds Cahoon, a member of the Council of 50 of the church, says it seems to be a matter almost forced upon us with a design to break us up. Brigham Young asked for a document, this is again in October, a farewell warning to America for its ill treatment of the saints. Now, let me just skip here for a moment. One of the reasons the saints are going to wait as long as they possibly can is so that they can take full benefit of the Nauvoo Temple that they've been building for the last 5 years, since 1841. They don't want to leave before they can at least receive some of the blessings of the temple, and those include such ordinances as temple sealings, as endowments and baptisms for the dead, which I don't have time to go into in great detail, but they desperately wanted to receive these blessings before they left. And one of the main reasons they didn't leave earlier was because they wanted to stay and receive their temple blessings that are such a critical factor for them. Another issue was this matter of the American-Mexican War, which was going to break out imminently. Actually, I believe it really comes to fore in May of 1846, when the United States will declare war on Mexico. And there was the great fear amongst the Latter-day Saints that we may be intercepted by the United States Army, because we didn't publicize where we were going. We were kind of, the United States government wondering which side of the saints on. And of course, the saints were upset that we were driven out of the United States. And so now this whole matter of the war becomes an issue. And will the United States Army become and interfere with the Exodus? And I won't go into that in great detail, but you notice on my fourth point, Brigham Young's fear was that the federal government would attempt to impede the immigration. And even though we were negotiating with the United States government, perhaps for financial support in the Exodus, we might be able to build ferries or forts for the U.S. government. Still, there was that fear that maybe it would be intercepted. So you got to put them all together. It's a very complicated story about when and why the saints left with Nauvoo. I'm skipping in the interest of time. Parley Pratt recommended, this is January of 46, that they leave in the winter. They weren't going to go in the spring. They said, no, let's leave in the winter when the ground is frozen, because they could move fast and reach the Bear River Valley in 3 months. And that's what they were looking at, the Bear River Valley, maybe the Great Basin, one of those places in the West where nobody else wanted, certainly not California, and certainly not Oregon. We'll go to some place that can hold 1 million people, as Brigham Young said, but where no one else wanted it. And we could reach there in time to put in a crop. And by leaving in May, we don't have to pay municipal taxes. That's a good point. And Heber C. Kimball suggests that men who can take their knapsacks on their back and their rifles on their shoulders and march through and be ready for any emergency. W. Phelps, if we can transplant this kingdom while the ground is frozen, we shall accomplish a great thing. And so, January the 13th, 1846, Brigham Young saying, some will say that they're not ready to go, but if we have to wait till we get ready, we shall never go till we are burned up and destroyed. We want to go whether we're ready or not. How many persons and families can be ready to start for California in 6 hours of notice? And not many were ready. Everyone wanted to go, but they weren't ready. Look what they have to bring. I won't read it all. But it's going to be on the 4th of February, 1846. The 4th of February, when the Latter-day Saints begin to leave Nauvoo in the teeth of a bitter winter. Now, why did they leave? You can see the reasons. And should we add also to that to buy time from the enemies. Okay, we are leaving. For goodness sakes, back off. We'll show you that we're going to leave. And to show you that, we're going to leave in the wintertime. So just back off and give us time to get out of here. And the mobs do, to some extent. But you know the tragic story, that the mobs only backed off until the late summer, and then there's an actual Battle of Nauvoo, sometimes called the War of Nauvoo in 1846, when the mobs, over 1,000 people, will attack the defenseless city of Nauvoo and drive out 900 in the great poor camps. And we're going to hear from Wendy Topp later today about that remarkable story, the rescue of those that were driven out by bayonet. My time is short. In addition to talking about the time, let me just conclude with a moment about why did the Latter-day Saints go along the trail that they did? Why in the world did they go on the southern trail across Iowa, when perhaps they should have gone up the Des Moines River? Those of you who know geography of Des Moines, we're talking about Keosauqua, Bentonsport, over there in eastern Iowa. Why didn't the Saints go up the Des Moines River? It would have been a lot easier. And then over to Council Bluffs, because that's where they wanted to be, to Council Bluffs by the 1st of June, 1846, because they knew they had to be on their way west by the 1st of June, 1846, so they get caught in the snows, as did the Donner Party, to their great destruction. Well, one of the reasons, folks, that they went the way they did, and this is a paradox, a remarkable irony. They went south. After they left Keosauqua and Bentonsport, south along the old Indian trails to Council Bluffs, because they wanted to be close, get this, they wanted to be close to the Missouri farms. Now, Missouri had driven out the Saints, but by staying close to Missouri, which was much more developed than Iowa was in 1846, they were close to farms and provisions. And many times the Saints went down incognito, down into Missouri, put on concerts, and worked on farms amongst the Missourians to get provisions and supplies. And the paradox is that in many ways, Missouri had driven out the Saints, becomes the lifeline of the Mormon exodus. So there's so many paradoxes, so many things to talk about here, and I just wanted to review with you why there was a Mormon trail in the first place, why this all came to be. And we've talked a little bit about why and when. Thank you very much.